count David Brainerd, a teacher and model, and stand in awe of him and find inspiration from him. Gideon Hawley was another missionary that went out inspired by Jonathan Edwards, and he wrote about the struggles that he had in the wilderness of New England. I indeed greatly need something more than human to support me. I read my Bible and Mr. Brainerd's life, the only books I brought with me, and from them I have a little support. Now why? Why did this life have this extraordinary impact? Or let me ask a more manageable question. Why has it had an impact on me? And then maybe it will transfer to these others. Why? The answer, in summary form, I think, is that Brainerd's life is a vivid, powerful testimony to the truth that God can and does use weak, sick, discouraged, beat down, lonely, struggling saints who cry to Him day and night to accomplish amazing things for His glory. And so what I want to do now in the time we have is to talk about the struggles that he had, 7 of them, the way he pressed on in these struggles, and thirdly, the effect of his life. First then, his struggles. Number 1, Brainerd struggled with almost constant sickness. He had to drop out of college, as I said, several times. He began to cough up blood in 1740. In 1744, he wrote, "Rode several hours in the rain through the howling wilderness, although I was so disordered in body that little or nothing but blood came from me." He would write things like this again and again. "In the afternoon my pain increased exceedingly, and was obliged to betake myself to bed, was sometimes almost bereaved of the exercise of my reason by the extremity of the pain." August 46, "Having lain in the cold sweat all night, I coughed much bloody matter this morning, and was under great disorder of body, and not a little melancholy." May of 47, Jonathan Edwards' house. The doctor said, "Your disease is incurable. You will die of consumption in a matter of weeks or months." In the last couple of months of his life, his suffering was absolutely incredible. You know, there were no pills in those days. Nothing to relieve what we say must be relieved today. Nothing. September 24, this is 2 weeks before he died. "In the greatest distress that ever I endured, having an uncommon kind of hiccup, which either strangled me or threw me into a straining to vomit." Edwards comments in the last week, "He told me it was impossible for any to conceive of the distress he felt in his breast. He manifested much concern lest he should dishonor God by impatience under the extreme agony, which was such that he said the thought of enduring it 1 minute longer was almost insupportable. And just before he died, he said to those around him, 'It is another thing than people imagine to die.'" The thing that strikes you about the suffering of Brainerd is not simply the severity of it, but the consistency of it. He always suffered. From the time he was a student, he never had relief for any significant amount of time. It was a relentless sickness. And he pressed on in his work. Second, Brainerd struggled with relentlessly recurring depression. He came to understand this a little, I think, Edwards said that at first he attributed far too much to spiritual desertion and far too little to the disease of melancholy. That's their phrase, the disease of melancholy. And so his later judgments about what was happening in his blackest moods were a little more balanced than his earlier ones. But it was a horrendous thing, nevertheless. And this was his greatest torment, not the tuberculosis. He did say that he detected a very profound difference in the melancholy after his conversion and the melancholy before his conversion, as though a great rock had been inserted underneath his life, so that he never despaired of the electing love of God after his conversion. A great gift to him in his darkest days. He would say repeatedly, "Black, God is gone, but I do not doubt His love." Things like that. A few words of his own to give you a flavor of what he experienced. Much of it was owing to his intense hatred for the remaining sin in his life. November 4:42. "'Tis distressing to feel in my soul that hell of corruption which still remains in me." And his sense of unworthiness was so intense that it sometimes just paralyzed him. January 23rd, 43. "Scarce ever felt myself so unfit to exist as now. I saw I was not worthy of a place among the Indians where I am going. None knows but those that feel it, what the soul endures that is sensibly shut out from the presence of God. Alas, 'tis more bitter than death." In fact, again and again he compared it to death, and I wrote down 22 places where he longed and pleaded that he would die. Sunday, February 3rd, 1745. "My soul remembered the wormwood and the gall, I might almost say the hell of Friday night last. And I was greatly afraid I should be obliged again to drink of that cup of trembling, which was inconceivably more bitter than death, and made me long for the grave unspeakably more than for hidden treasures." Sunday, 44, December 16. "Was so overwhelmed with dejection that I knew not how to live. I longed for death exceedingly. My soul was sunk in deep waters, and the floods were ready to drown me. I was so much oppressed that my soul was in a kind of horror." And what compounded this experience for Brainerd was that the depression began to infect and lame his devotional exercises and his ministry of preaching. March 9, 43. "Rode 16 miles to Montauk and had some inward sweetness on the road, but something of flatness and deadness after I came there and had seen the Indians. Withdrew and endeavored to pray, but found myself awfully deserted and left." It was immobilized sometime in his distresses. September 46. "Was scarce ever more confounded with a sense of my own unfruitfulness and unfitness of my work than now. Oh, what a dead, heartless, barren, unprofitable wretch did I now see myself to be. My spirits were so low, my bodily strength so wasted, that I could do nothing at all. At length, being much overdone, lay down on a buffalo skin and sweat much of the whole night." But Brainerd pressed on and did not quit. He never quit. Third, Brainerd struggled with loneliness. He tells of having to endure profane talk of strangers one night, April 43. "Oh, I longed for some dear Christian who knew my distresses." A month later, he says, "Most of the talk I hear is either Highland Scotch or Indian. I have no fellow Christian to whom I might unbosom myself and lay open my spiritual sorrows, with whom I might take sweet counsel and conversation about the heavenly things and join in social prayer." In December 1745, he wrote